do remember something that happened when I was still a student social worker. That is when I look back on it, I'm fascinated that this happened. I was working on a, what we call on placement during the training, and I was working in a social work office, and I was working with an older woman who had been widowed, and she'd become increasingly fearful on her own at home. She was suspecting robberies and smelling things, and she was very, very anxious. And I had a meeting, a placement meeting with my tutor from college and my supervisor in the social work office. So the tutor was coming to really check up. How was I doing on my placement? Was I going to pass the placement? So I was asked to share a case, and I shared this case. And he asked me, so you've described this woman, blah, blah, blah. What do you call that? What is that? And I knew what he was asking for, but I didn't want to give it. And I said, well, she's a lonely woman who was widowed and she's fearful. What do you call it? And I carried on talking about the client and her life. And he asked me again, what do you call it? And then I knew how serious the situation that I was in at that point. Some people would say that's paranoia. And he sat back and said, oh, right. And he told me later that if I hadn't used that word, he would have failed my placement. And that was terribly interesting to me, that back now, because if I was to say what's the most important thing about solution focus, I say it's treating people as people and not as labels, not as walking problems, and not being expert on who they are. They are experts on who they are and who they want to be. They might not feel that they are, so our job is to help coax their expertise. And I think I look back on that and I know that was a very important moment that I knew what I believed in. I also had to play the system. I had to use the language that the system requires from me in order to negotiate my way in the real world. So I don't know if that quite answers your question, but that was part of my development and probably why I was attracted to something like solution focus and not to something much more problem focused.
And you had a sense in the room that this was not so respectful to her to start calling her things that she would maybe not agree on herself or recognize. Or
yeah. So it was about respect. It was about look, this was back in early days where 1970s, and I'd done all my reading about labeling and all the sort of radical thinkers, Ivan Illich and people like that, and it shocked me that I was being put in a position of having to talk about a client of mine, in this pathological way. It was something about the language, not just that she herself might have been upset by the description, I don't know, but the fact that we as professionals were talking in this way about clients as if they're sort of strange, different animals.